Hello, Year 9. Now, after our brief pause from reading the story The Red Room to work on our Gothic company paint shades, all of which were excellent, by the way, very impressive, it's time for us to read the next part of the story. So let's just have a quick recap of where we are and what's happened so far. Now, remember, the story is set in the Victorian period. Science has overtaken religion and superstition as what people believe in more and more. One young man visits a sinister castle, uninhabited, apart from a group of strange and deformed servants. He is wanting to spend the night in a famous haunted room. The last man who tried it was found dead a year ago to this very night. This man wants to prove that the ghosts do not exist. The servants try to scare him and persuade him not to stay the night, but he insists. Now, the last thing we read was the sequence in which we saw him walk through the castle, and his senses are tingling with apprehension as he sees statues and shadows. His mind plays tricks on him. He reaches the door to the Red Room and opens it. Remember, last week you wrote the next paragraph to the story, speculating on what he would find. Now, your paragraphs were excellent, and I was pleased to find that you have suitably dark imaginations, and you will need them later in this lesson. Now, let's read the next bit of the story from the original writer's perspective. Let's see what the narrator actually finds behind the door to the Red Room. I entered, closed the door behind me at once, turning the key I found in the lock inside, and stood with the candle held aloft, surveying the scene of my vigil. The great Red Room of Lorraine Castle, in which the young Duke had died, or rather, in which he had begun his dying, for he had opened the door and fallen headlong down the steps I had just climbed. That had been the end of his vigil, of his gallant attempt to conquer the ghostly tradition of the place, and never, I thought, had apoplexy better served the ends of superstition. There were other and older stories that clung to the room, back to the half-incredible beginning of it all, the tale of a timid wife and the tragic end that came to her husband's joke of frightening her. And looking round that huge, shadowy room with its black window bays, its recesses, its alcoves, its dusty brown-red hangings and dark, gigantic furniture, one could well understand the legends that had sprouted in its dark corners, its germinating darkness. My candle was a little tongue of light in the vastness of the chamber. Its rays failed to pierce to the opposite end of the room and left an ocean of dull red mystery and suggestion, sentinel shadows and watching darknesses beyond its island of light, and the stillness of desolation brooded over it all. I must confess, some undefinable quality of that ancient room disturbed me. I tried to fight the feeling down. I resolved to make a systematic examination of the place, and so, by leaving nothing to the imagination, dispel the fanciful suggestions of not knowing what was in each crevice and corner before they obtained a hold of fear upon me. After satisfying myself as to the fastening of the door, I began to walk around the room, peering round each article of furniture, tucking up the valances of the bed and opening its curtains wide. In one place, there was a distinct echo to my footsteps. The noises I made seemed so little that they enhanced rather than broke the silence of the place. I pulled up the blinds and examined the fastenings of the several windows. Attracted by the fall of a particle of dust, I leaned forward and looked up the blackness of the wide chimney. Then, trying to preserve my scientific attitude of mind, I walked round and began tapping the oak panelling for any secret opening. But I desisted. I stopped before reaching the alcove. I saw my face in a mirror, white. There were 2 big mirrors in the room, each with a pair of sconces bearing candles, and on the mantel shelf too were candles in china candlesticks. All these I lit, one after the other. The fire was laid, an unexpected consideration from the old housekeeper, and I lit it to keep down any disposition to shiver. And when it was burning well, I stood round with my back to it and regarded the room again. I pulled up a chintz-covered armchair and a table to form a kind of barricade in front of me, and on this lay my revolver, ready to hand. My precise examination had done a little good, but I still found the remoter darkness of the place and its perfect stillness too stimulating for my imagination. The echoing of the stir and crackling of the fire was no comfort to me. The shadow in the alcove at the end of the room began to display that undefinable quality of a presence, as if something were there, that odd suggestion of a lurking living thing that comes easily to the mind in silence and solitude. So to reassure myself, I walked with a candle into the alcove and satisfied myself that there was nothing tangible, nothing real there. I stood that candle upon the floor and left it in that position. By this time, I was in a state of considerable nervous tension, although, to my reason, there was no adequate cause for my condition. My mind, however, was perfectly clear. I said out loud to myself, quite unreservedly, that nothing supernatural could happen. Now, we will leave the story there for now. And next time we will read what actually happens to the man in the red room when we finish the story. At this point in the story, it's clear that the writer is leading us, the reader, into expecting something strange and supernatural to happen. How? Well, why else would the narrator announce that nothing supernatural could happen? Is that out of cockiness or out of genuine worry, as if he's trying to convince himself? You can decide. So, for one final time with this story, I want you to write me the next stage of the story, the last stage. Use your imagination to create what happens during that night, now that the young man is in the red room. I want dark. I want twisted. I want scary. I want intense. Or you could reject all of that, and the man could be proven right, that there is no ghost in the room, and thus that the legend is false. It's up to you. You decide.